Welcome back, my friends, to the sweet spot where IT leaders share their insights with other IT leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as every week, I have here my two co-hosts, Paul Lewis and Howard Holton. Hey, guys.
Thanks for that introduction, Carlos. As always, I'm Howard Holton, and I'm here with Paul Lewis.
Hi there. How's it going?
And we've got kind of an interesting one this week. We're going to have some fun this lovely Friday in the summer, and we're going to talk about Legos. Because really, who doesn't like Legos? So, Paul, we were just talking about it. I know you have a Lego builder collection. What kind of Legos are you into? What do you like?
So we do Lego architecture for the most part. So these are the buildings or the great Wall of China kind of thing. We like to go to places, visit them, like in Dubai, see the big tower. I think it's the Burj Khalifa, now I remember it. And then come back and build it when we get home. So it's almost like it's part of our souvenir process. And then as we remember the interesting trip, we get to build the tower and then put it up on the mantle. My entire dining room is filled with these kind, which we do as a family, which I enjoy.
Nice. I'm a car guy. So the Legos I prefer are those based off of a car I particularly love. The challenge tends to be I'm not super on top of Legos, so I tend to miss them and then have to buy them on the secondary market. It's just decidedly unpleasant. But I do have this one right here.
Oh.
Zoom is doing its best to green screen out, which is I think interesting.
Nice. That doesn't seem car related.
It's the Lego Boba Fett. Because I'm a big Star Wars nerd, as you may have guessed. I don't know, Although I do have to complain, there's not a whole lot of beards represented in Star Wars.
It is true.
You fix that in some of the upcoming episodes or upcoming films and shows. I think it'd be great. A little more beards would be nice.
We need to talk to them directly. Both the Star Wars people and the Lego people make that happen.
I tend to agree. Although I don't know how do you think Lego beards would look?
That's true. I'm not sure how. It would definitely be straight. Well, when you looked at the Lego movie, Merlin was in it, right? Gandalf was in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I recollect what their actual beards look like.
I don't remember.
I bet
I don't know if they did like big busts or anything. But so I mean, I think the joy of Lego is a couple things, right? One, we all kind of had Legos as kids, and it's kind of it harkens back to that kind of childhood that we liked. When we look at the more complex things, it also gives us the ability to build something physical, tangible in the real world. And I think in IT, that's something that we miss a lot, right? I get into cars and woodworking specifically, so at the end of that hobby, I end up with something done that I can say, I did that. I built that, I changed that, I modified that, I created a thing that exists in the real world that is tactile, that people can see and look and touch, that speaks to something I wanted. And I think in IT, we don't generally get that sense of accomplishment within our day-to-day job, right? We get much more of the, I did a thing because I said I did a thing, and only people who know about the thing are able to verify the thing even exists.
Right.
And
it's a bunch of to-do lists. It's a bunch of day-to-day activities that don't necessarily amount to something grand because you as an individual are a contributor to a bigger project.
Right. Oh, look, I worked on my website. I worked on the company's website today. Oh, you built the website. Oh, no. I brought up the new servers that all of that stuff sits on. Okay, how do I see that? Well, you don't really see it because it's pretty much the same, but until we hit 10,000 additional users per second, like it's really a scalability thing. Like all of that starts to become really hard to explain to your mother what you do. Right. Versus, hey, I built a table. Oh, I'm so proud. I could see the table. That's a beautiful table.
Yes, there's not a lot of obviousness, which we will have a future pod on how our families think about what we do and how they describe it, which I think will be interesting.
That's true. I think that might be our first pure comedy episode.
Right.
Like there's no real intention for it to be pure comedy, but ultimately interviewing our families and trying to get them to describe what we do for a living, there's going to be some comedy contained in there, whether we like it or not.
You did describe as kids as us having Lego, and I think I had two parts to that, right? I had Lego sets to which, had a prescribed outcome, right? Here's the thing I need you to produce. And
Yep.
it potentially even had little bags for little, ones, twos, and threes worth of work. And of course, it had a page by page how to build it. But then I also had the bag o Lego, right? It was various and sundry. And it was pure creative, pure experimentation. And you might have actually started with that and building whatever you thought was interesting to build. Usually it was, tall buildings to which you could push down, or some sort of vehicle with that you could roll across the table. But that was about it. But those two still existed, still require an outcome. But at least one time was working with the raw materials, one a full plan.
And I don't know about you, but when I worked with the raw Lego materials, because I had exactly the same thing, right? I bought Lego sets, but my parents would also every so often buy me Legos, thinking
Right.
He does so well with the Lego sets. I'm sure he'll do great with just raw Legos.
He's so creative.
Never went that way.
He's the Picasso of Legoing.
Yeah. I mean, it was much more like if you ask a kindergartner to draw a car, you get a shape that you think maybe has wheels on it. Let's say a second grader to draw a car, right? Most of them, it turns out like it's this kind of wedge shape with some wheels on it, right? Maybe you get a truck thing that you can kind of determine as a truck based on the kind of basic outline shapes of a truck.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how all those Legos turned out for most people, right? Most of us, we put those Legos together. It's a building in that it has a rough building shape, but none of the real features that you'd want in a building.
Right.
Versus if I sit down with the plans to build this Boba Fett, I guarantee you it will turn out exactly like Boba Fett.
Right.
When I build the 911 GT3, it turns out exactly like the 911 GT3. And granted, my build of the kit will look the same as everyone else's build of the kit, but I kind of knew that going in, and that was kind of the purpose.
Right.
And so
you weren't looking for creativity. You were looking for what? What was the fun? If you knew what the outcome was going to be already.
The fun was building the established outcome, right? Being able to put it up on the shelf and say, I built that thing and it does exactly what I knew it was going to do. It 100% accomplishes the goal that I set out to accomplish when I built it.
Right.
At no point am I ever disappointed. I'm just disappointed that I don't have an infinite
8 years old and up.
Yeah.
Really get this done.
Yeah. And the fact is, right, the same thing translates over to IT. Right? I don't set out on a project to acquire a bunch of technology to see what maybe I could build with that technology.
Right.
We don't go, I'm buying, what are you buying this year? I'm buying 14 petabytes of storage. I'm buying, 397 processing cores and 7 terabytes of memory. Okay, what are you going to do with it? I don't know yet. We're going to figure it out once we get the stuff on the floor.
That's right. It's my big pile. It's my big pile. And I'm going to invent it as soon as I get it.
We're going to rack it. We're going to stack it. Then maybe we'll talk about a software stack and an application stack. No, we don't do that. We haven't, unless you work in a lab where your goal is to try to figure out how to push this stuff to a new limit, even then you start with a goal. My goal is to see, can we push 110 million IOPS a second sustained across 3K files for the next 150 years?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like even then you set out with a goal, even if you're buying a pile of stuff to make that goal. And unfortunately, vendors tend to look at it as though it's the first scenario and not the second scenario. Right?
Because they're not necessarily providing the entire kit. They might, in fact, only have a unique Lego piece, and they're hoping that we have the entire rest of the kit or can compile it together.
At the same time, I'm not certain that they're aware of what the other pieces are, right? Like we'll use the car example. Okay, we're building a car, and I need you to supply the wheels and tires, and the wheels and tires need to be able to go 150 miles an hour for 90 minutes at a time, right?
Right.
Like, okay, cool, here's some wheels and tires. Oh, we forgot to tell you we're building a four-wheel drive.
Right.
We forgot to tell you we're building a slot car. We forgot to tell you we need the the front wheels, because it's really just a dragster. We actually need to go 300 miles an hour. It's just a dragster. So the front wheels don't really need to sustain that speed. It's really just the rear wheels that need to sustain that speed. The front we expect to be off the ground, right? Like,
Right.
or you
For
know,
show.
you're providing the door panels only to find out that you didn't even ask what color the rest of the car is, and so it looks like something that was assembled from a junkyard over the course of 6 months.
Right.
Right. The number of times that we miss the target on either side, right, customer side or vendor side, simply because we're not really having the contextual conversations and really making sure everyone fully understands what the outcome is.
Right.
Right. And so often we don't even state the outcome. I need this much, I need you to fulfill an order based on these technical requirements. But we didn't start with the technical requirements. So why would we end with the technical requirements, right?
Right.
Shouldn't we say, we want to accomplish this thing and we think your component requires some of these technical requirements, and these are all the accoutrements around your piece. These are all the things you're going to have to interact with as they're specified to make sure we accomplish the goal.
Right.
Right.
But you're not really saying, or maybe you are you really saying that there's an expectation on the IT operator's part to not only know what all the Lego I require, but also have determined what the process is to put it together and what the what that thing looks like at the end, what the ultimate outcome is going to be.
I mean, not necessarily.
Does all that work have to get done?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's the point of having a partner to begin with. And I think that the answer to that question varies depending on, do you have a partner or a vendor?
Okay.
Right? Because if I have a vendor, then I'm asking them to supply a part to which I've engineered the purpose of that part. Right? Hitachi, great example, right? We manufacture millions of products. We don't necessarily consult with the company that supplies the bolts to hold the tractor together about how to use the bolts. Right? Instead, we say, I need an M12-8 bolt in quantity 257,000 by this date, built to this metallic specification, right? Like we hand over a set of specs, they return back. It makes sense because they know exactly how to slot that bolt into the overall machine and assemble it. Right? But in the case that you don't know absolutely every piece of the machine and how you're going to assemble it, right? And you're looking for partners, right? You don't have that Lego manual that goes page to page and you go, oh, I need a white 4x4 for this. If all you need is a white 4x4, dig through the box, and oh, I don't have that white 4x4, I can order that white 4x4. Right? But in the case that you don't have that manual, that you're like, I think I want to build a car today because we need to get from point A to point B, you probably should turn to a partner and say, hey, we're looking to build a car. Can you help us build a car?
Yep. And I might need it custom. I might need it slightly different than all the other cars, like kits I've seen, but at least you have an understanding of what that outcome looks like, what that goal needs to look like. You need somebody to both help you with the guidebook and help you with the bill of materials, right? Helping you figure out what are all the piece parts it takes in order to build that car. Are they different partners? Are they different vendors? Are those different people? Or are they one mega person, one mega vendor that can do it all?
I mean, I think it depends, but I think it's likely that it's more than one, right? I think it's likely that you have at least 3 vendors, right? Maybe you have one infrastructure vendor, maybe you have one application vendor, and maybe you have one kind of either security or monitoring kind of, vendor, vendor, whatever you want to put, right? I think in the case that you have one, that's great. And by all means do that. But the chances are it's probably a set of vendors, right? A set of partners, as it were. Again, right? Partner versus vendor. Yeah. And at the very least, you have one, right? And maybe you don't need to involve the person supplying whatever the component is, but there should at least be one vendor that is your primary partner in helping achieve whatever the outcome is, adding whatever the capability is.
And the instruction sets, are they analysts? Are they advisory type system integrators? What do you think? Would you build it yourself?
I mean, I think
come
it
from the
depends.
vendors.
Like, it depends. Like, what's my level of comfort with what I'm trying to do? Is what I'm trying to do an upgrade of something that I've done before, or am I adding a whole new line of business to IT?
Right.
How new is the team that's going to manage it? And how comfortable is the team that's going to manage it with the capability that I'm adding? Right? If it's the first time I'm doing containers, I probably want to have someone else at least sit side by side with me and build the run book.
Right.
Right. But if I'm changing, let's say I'm changing from VMware to Hyper-V, now I'm probably looking for more of an advisor. It's probably not a good example, but you know,
Right. Sure.
maybe I'm adding a management layer on top of Docker. Right. I've been using containers for a while, and I want to add Mesos or K8s or something. Right. Maybe Ansible Tower to help me manage. Right. Maybe in that case, it's an advisor because I'm augmenting what I'm already doing. Right. But I would say the more different it is from your current operations, the more close-knit that partnership should be. And that gives me, sure, it's going to cost more, without a doubt. There's going to be more cash outlay. But it also means when it goes sideways, there's someone I can call and go, hey, that thing you helped me do is broken. Right? It's not accomplishing the goal I set out to accomplish. Bring back the team. Let's get this all done again. And the theory is, if it's an 8-person team, sure, there's turnover, but 6 people from that team probably will be there still within the next year.
Right.
And so there's a fairly decent chance it's this thing that just went into production and failed, right? Rather than just going, hey, that random workload that I threw on your storage isn't working. Hey, that random application that I threw on your server isn't working. Oh, okay, I don't know what that application is. I don't know what that workload is. I don't know how it's evolved or what the intention was with it. So all I can do as a vendor then is traditional troubleshooting methodology.
Right. Yep, and it's very project centric. So when back in the real world, when we used to do these things for real, it was always, hey, I have to create a new application that does something new for the business. And I might have to create that from scratch, right? So an application that doesn't exist whatsoever, and therefore I don't have the infrastructure application to deal with it. And now I've created this project team to say, okay, well, I have a sense of the business outcome and the business flow. From that, I need to determine what that application sense and flow is. From that, I need to know what the types of transactions and behavior is going to be, so I can figure out what the infrastructure is going to need. And that is, in many ways, becomes the project plan to deliver on this thing, which I now need to go compile a set of vendors and partners to actually deliver on that. On occasion, I'd bring in an SI, right, to say, this is a business I haven't done before, or a process I don't have a rich history in. Could you provide to me some sort of framework? So I'm now processing these type of widgets. Of all your awesome experience of processing widgets, give me the step-by-step process on how one would process widgets. And I'm going to use that as both my application sort of user storylines, and then what it's going to take to build the infrastructure to support that. And then I might require a technical system integrator to actually bring all the awesomeness together, especially if I want to use new technology.
So what I would want to recommend then is, as a leader within IT, whatever your sphere of influence is, you kind of need 4 buckets, right? Not just your bucket of what you actually know, but you need 4 additional buckets. You need a bucket, number 1, that's filled with the business stakeholder. You got to be able to check that box for absolutely everything that you do, everything that's on the floor now and everything you want to add. There needs to be a business stakeholder, someone who understands not just what the goal is, but why the goal exists and how the business plans on executing against that goal, right? More than just kind of a simple 1-page success criteria, but rather if we're augmenting an existing process, how is the process going to change? What's their plan to train on that new process? How do they track success? What KPIs are they aligning to? 2, I need my list of trusted advisors. And that list is going to change based on what the kind of product type is generally, right? I probably don't have one trusted advisor that I trust for everything, but I may have a trusted advisor for infrastructure. I may have a trusted advisor for security. I may have a trusted advisor for certain type, for my database applications or whatever it happens to be. Then I have a list of partners. They haven't really made it to the trusted advisor kind of position, right? But I still trust them. I work with them. I trust their technical people. I look to them to have input on the things that I request from them. And then I have a list of vendors. And I would almost go down the list in that order, right? Start with the business, start with then the trusted advisor, then the partner, then the vendors to kind of fill in the spaces, and let each of them bring to the table as they go down more, a larger percentage of what they're comfortable with, and narrowing it down so that hopefully the least amount that's acquired is from the least valuable or strategic, member of the party, which is the vendor, right?
Right.
And I think that'll help build for more success rather than less success. Now, as a leader, you also have to take into consideration, how am I going to manage this as a capability? And that's if you're playing the sweet spot buzzword bingo, we use the term capability a lot.
Right. True. Because it's not just introducing technology to your business, but it's potentially introducing a whole new set of skills to your business. You've got 800 people who only know what you do, and you're now introducing potentially new application, new infrastructure, new process, new ability to monitor it, potentially even new vendors, new partners to deliver on it. That requires an upskill, reskill, potentially replacement of people, which means that has to be part and parcel of the outcome of the project, not just the business outcome, but my team needs to be able to run and manage and operate it, not unlike it does everything else I do. That's the new capability.
So I would also then say one of the things that probably is worth some investment time is, in fact, project management. And I would call it product management, stop calling other stuff projects, but whatever you want to call it, project management or product management. Because what I see often is a project manager is someone who controls the milestones and the distance to the milestones, and puts together an email that says we're on target, we're not on target, we're on budget, we're not on budget. Right. And the fact is that's not super valuable to the organization. Like, it is a checkbox. It is something that absolutely needs to be done. But what I think is a far more intelligent approach is, this is an opportunity to add something new to the business, which means it's also an opportunity to promote the value of IT. Right. So as a leader, we should also be asking, what does this do to raise our exposure within the organization, to raise the perceived value of IT within the organization? And thus, how do I make sure that I'm never just taking what my trusted advisor put together as a series of decks and passing that on? Right? How do I make sure that we're adding our own kind of flavor, our own style, our own input, right? And kind of some of that travel knowledge, some of that corporate culture into that information to make sure that it's really personalized for the group that we're giving it to. Right.
And it's possible, because you're not going to take verbatim these decks. You're going to now apply organizational knowledge to it, right? You're going to apply that I have hundreds of applications with varying degrees of importance, and this has to be slotted into that sort of varying degree. I also have to appreciate that the technology team aren't the users of this application, the business is, and therefore I have to appreciate what that means to transition from IT to the business once sort of those projects are completed. And of course, the culture of the teams holistically, right? What's the longevity of these type of workloads, these type of applications? What's the expectations of the business users to innovate in some interesting way? Does the business want to learn as much as IT wants to learn? These are all sort of the cultural aspects of all of these changes. It can't just be buying a SaaS product, implementing its generic sense and assuming that's the best approach.
But it does happen.
Yeah.
And
which is why I'm not a huge fan of the onlys or first strategies, right? Cloud onlys or cloud firsts, or blockchain only or first, or everything has to be API driven, or everything has to be accessible by the business users, that we can have low code, no code on everything. That makes no sense to me. It has to relate specifically to what and how the business wants to operate. And if in fact they want to stay away from all things technology because they're focused on processing financial transactions and they don't want to do any low code, no code activities, then that should be fine with us, right? It should be fine to produce code if, in fact, producing code in this area is beneficial to the business. It can't be so binary.
Well, I'm a big fan of firsts.
Yeah.
But I'm only a big fan of firsts within the context of you ask the question. Right? So cloud first is, does it make sense to put this in the cloud? We look to cloud first. No, it doesn't make sense to put this in the cloud. Therefore, secondary, we look to our own infrastructure, right?
Sure.
Whatever first is, I think does make sense, but it has to be not, cloud first can't be, we're going to push it to the cloud unless it fails.
Right.
Right. It's just asking the question. We ask the question, does the cloud make sense for this or not?
As a decision-making flowchart, 100% true.
Yes.
Not as a testing of technology.
No. Cloud first doesn't mean we put it in the cloud first and hope it doesn't fail.
Right.
Cloud first just means we ask the question first. And I think the same for code, right? And cloud can't be the goal and code can't be the goal. API can't be the goal, right? None of these can be the goal. The goal is to enable the business.
Right.
And therefore, does cloud help the business enable the goal? Yes or no, right? I think that's an acceptable cloud first strategy. And I think the same for API first, right? I'm a big fan of everything should have an API. I think it's a good policy to have. I think it's a good thing when judging technologies, right? How do I make sure I can access the things I need to access using code so that I can then develop more value from that thing, right? If I'm putting data into something and there's no API, how do I get the data out into my big data system so I can use that data in other ways?
Right.
At the same time, no decision should be made with the goal of promoting the technology. And I think we fall into a trap there. I think we get caught too much in our policies and go, well, we can't do this thing. It would be otherwise perfect for the business and significantly better than any other solution, but it lacks this IT feature, and therefore we're going to throw it out. We're going to move on to the next one. And then we're going to take something that rather than hitting 97%, hits 84%.
Yeah, it's the first as table stakes that I find is a poor strategy, right? So I'm going to pick product A over product B because it has this API that I may or may never use, versus product A and product B is actually beneficial comparatively to the business differently, and I'm going to take the better business decision regardless of whether it has an API first interface into it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Right. Start with the business. What's the goal of the business? How does this help the company make money or accomplish a thing that ultimately helps the company make money? And figure out what one does that best, and then go, how many of our table stakes does it accomplish? And what is the cost to not having the others? Because there's a cost.
Right.
Not having an API may mean I don't have the ability to easily grab the data.
Right.
Okay, so what's the cost to that? Do I have to work with the vendor? Is there some hidden schema? Like, there's a cost. So
Sure.
Okay, so let's just document the cost and do a cost benefit analysis like we're supposed to do anyways.
Right.
Instead, I agree. We tend to look at that stuff and go, well, you didn't meet our ridiculous table stakes that don't actually matter for the goal that we should have set, so you're out.
Right. Yeah. That we don't use in any way anyway.
Right.
Well, you don't have this one type of API integration? Well, sorry. Unfortunately, we need that one. We've never used it before,
right.
but just
but we might in the future.
That's right.
Make sure. Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Or the expectation that it works in all environments. Yes, one could install on premise. Yes, a third party can manage it. Yes, it could be in the cloud. In fact, any cloud. And if you don't meet all of those criteria, then I can't buy from you, which is also kind of a weird thing.
Right. How much of your stuff is in the cloud today? Like 11%. Okay. Is there really a problem putting this with the other 88%?
Right.
Right. Like, yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great if it did absolutely everything you want at every step of the way. And I do think it's an important question to ask.
Yeah.
Right. Where have you seen cloud success? How is this a cloud native application? Like, I think these are important questions.
Sure.
But I think they're important questions for what is my long-term strategy and where am I at? Look, if you're 100% cloud today, then you don't have and you have no on-prem, then that's not an option for you anyways.
Yeah, that's a different situation.
Right, in which case that is a valid table stake.
Sure.
Right? but I think for most of us, especially for most enterprises, for most companies that are more than 10 or 15 years old, that's not really the truth of the matter.
Yep.
Right? And what we see in the market is a lot more focus on hybrid multi-cloud rather than cloud only. And so I think having those questions is important, and being able to kind of go through a checklist and go, it meets all of these requirements, and that becomes part of the report card when using to kind of do your cost benefit analysis and decide what the best solution is. But ultimately, the business should always come first.
So putting your buyer hat on, and you produced an RFP that had these kind of table stakes, would you answer a question from a vendor that said, I see that you want this thing. What percentage of your current deployment is using this thing? Would you answer that question?
I absolutely would.
Yeah. So that they could determine whether it's actually a current need or a future need, or a need that's probably improbable or impossible in the future anyway.
Well, and I wouldn't just answer it with a number. Right. I wouldn't just say,
you wouldn't
how
just say
much
11%.
of your current infrastructure is utilizing APIs, therefore how much of a requirement is that? I could very well say 11%,
right,
of which 96% are from purchases within the last 3 years. And this is our plan to utilize the API with this tool set.
Right.
Or we want everything to have an API because, well, only 4% of our stuff is moving that way. It's a critical 4%. And we see in the future the potential of this thing being incorporated into that. I think both of those are valid answers from the buyer's perspective. But then as a buyer, it's also okay if they come back and say, well, is it okay if our roadmap says within the next 12 months we'll have API support? Right. Oh, yeah. Like, okay, I can do that because within 12 months is probably going to align close to us. Would you be all right with me being on the beta list for that API?
Right.
Can we make sure we're involved in that decision making, in kind of the test, the public test when you get customers in and testing? Can we make sure we're included in that? Like, I think all of that dialogue is great. And I would not, if that's the scenario, I wouldn't eliminate it. Now, on the other hand, if I was saying we see this, the data produced within this being a critical piece of our big data strategy, you're not having an API makes it more difficult to get us data out of there. How do we access the data? And how do we access it in a way that allows it to fit with the rest of the capabilities of the team using to access that data? I think that's also valid.
Perfectly valid. I would just look, if I were the one asking the question, I would look for hints that it's a future strategy with no particular current plans, right? So yes, blockchain intrigues me, and I require all external system integration to be via blockchain. I've never used it nor understand really how it gets used, but thou shalt have it. That would be a problem, right?
I agree.
And I'd kind of expect my vendor to push back on me, right? To say, I hear what you're saying, but if you have no current plans for it, can you give me a sense of its level of mandatoriness? Right?
I'm also totally fine with a vendor replying back and going, hey, just so you know, we looked at incorporating blockchain into our tool set. However, for this type of work, what we determined was blockchain's not a good use. And these are the 7 reasons we think blockchain's terrible to put in here.
Right.
Therefore, we'd really like to learn more about what you're attempting to do with blockchain in this case, with this data set, with this application, because we may be wrong.
Right.
Right. And I see a lot of that when I hear customers are doing blockchain and we get into kind of the weeds on it. What I hear is it generally is technology requirement pushing down rather than technology requirement pushing up. And I hate to say it, but the ones that work the best are when a technologist goes, hey, we have an existing process, and the process is this, and the data set is this, and there is a new technology that solves that in a way that it couldn't be solved before, that is a perfect use of that technology.
Right.
Where it's technology for business sake, it works out really well.
Right.
When it is technology for shareholder stake, no. Right. When it's, we want to do a checkbox that says we're doing blockchain, we have a blockchain strategy. I think that tends to go sideways unless our blockchain strategy is blockchain. Our blockchain strategy is no blockchain today because the current state of blockchain doesn't work for our workflow, does not work for our business, does not make logical sense. And I think that's a valid blockchain. But when it's, our shareholders want to see that we're using blockchain in our intellectual property,
It's way more difficult.
Well, I just think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's way more than difficult. I think it's dangerous, right? So these new technologies have danger associated with them, and we tend to ignore the regulatory and compliance dangers until it's way too late, right? It's 3 years later, and somebody from the regulatory compliance team goes, "I heard you're using blockchain in that thing. We never certified blockchain, and blockchain's immutable, and you've got PII contained in an immutable blockchain, so we're going to need you to undo all that."
Right.
Right?
Find all that data in the million nodes that it's currently being distributed in.
Right. Right. And for those who don't think that's going to happen, that is absolutely going to happen. PII poisoning in blockchain is going to be the #1 failure of blockchain.
Right.
And it's going to happen the second any court rules it that way. Right. So until a court actually rules that putting it in blockchain is okay under the following circumstances, I really don't think you should put PII in blockchain for any reason. But
that being said, there is, and I'm sure you agree, there is tons of value in having an innovation team, and that innovation team exists for the purpose of learning. It may not exist for the purpose of applying, but at the very least, it's for the purpose of learning. Have a perspective, have a point of view, write that down, determine if it applies or if it doesn't, and if it applies, let's test it out to see what the impact of its application will be. And if in fact that eventually turns out to be 10% of the time a production worthy change, then ensure that you're handing off to the production worthy team to deliver into that production worthy environment.
100%.
Awesome.
I would also encourage that some piece of your innovation team probably needs to contain not just technologists, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying like the whole thing, because your innovation team can very well be people that just look at technology and just try to validate, does the technology have a value? And adding other people to that very well may be a barrier there. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's phase 2. Hey, we think this technology is neat. We think it has an application. Would you agree? That probably should include business stakeholders, governance stakeholders, finance stakeholders, right? People that can really look at
all the other dimensions.
Outside.
Yeah, all the other dimensions other than technically feasible.
Right, right. And I would say until it goes through both of those, right, technical viability and call it corporate viability, it doesn't exit the innovation center.
Right.
Right. We don't talk about it to people not in the innovation center until both sides sign off. Otherwise, I think you're just asking for more trouble than it's worth.
And I'm a big fan of not producing productionized value in the innovation center.
Oh, I totally agree.
Once viability is a check mark, then it's a train the actual teams who deliver on actual production worthy and get them to produce it as if they would any other project.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it, and I would almost argue that there's almost no handoff. Right? Like we've gone through the effort, we've found that there is viability here. These are our lessons learned. Here's the research paper we wrote. Enjoy the research paper we wrote. Because otherwise, because what you don't want to get in the habit of is your innovation team turning into your beta support team.
Right.
Right? And then your, oh crap, we put this in production support team.
Right.
Then you don't have an innovation center anymore. You just have another help desk.
That's right.
And it's a complicated, convoluted, and expensive help desk. Right. Which is why think of it much more like a research team and really focus on letting them do research and publish papers that development teams can then take. And they're welcome to pick up the phone and call and go, hey, I'm trying to accomplish this. Do you have a code snippet that I can own? Yes. You now own this code snippet. I don't want to hear about it again. Like, I'm happy to help you, but I'm not taking over support on a code snippet.
Yeah, and there's value in that. They've already done the applicability to the business, the applicability to our own teams, the applicability to our own capabilities. Yeah. And that's already been pre-done. And that way it's not a generic MQ. Right? It's just a quadrant. We've already taken this and made the next step of that to say, here's how one would actually do it if in fact we want to create value from it. Awesome. Yeah. So is that a Lego piece? Is that a kit? What comes out of innovation team? Back to our original premise.
This is what I think much closer to this is what comes out of the innovation team. Right? If I were to define it, I would say it's this. Right? Here is the packaging for the thing that we want. There's an instruction manual contained within inside, and maybe it's just also an instruction manual on where to get the pieces and not necessarily the pieces.
Right.
right? Like, I think that is totally acceptable. You will need a piece that is shaped roughly like this, that fits this slot. I think that's totally okay, right? And maybe it's the beta version of that. We don't have the fancy box, right? What we really have probably is parts of a manual without necessarily the steps in between, but the end result per step.
Right.
I think that's totally acceptable.
But at the very least, we know you need a Boba Fett helmet.
Correct. We're building a Boba Fett helmet. This is where the Boba Fett helmet fits. Maybe these are the large pieces to the Boba Fett helmet, right? Like Boba Fett, as defined as Boba Fett, has a particular shape to it. It's not going to look like an X-wing fighter, right? It's going to look like a head wearing a helmet. The color palette is a green and red and black and gold color palette. You know, like those kind of pieces. And because it's a bust, it's going to need a stand to rest on, right? Like you should be able to, out of the Innovation Center, to define those things. So if you were to stand up and read from what the Innovation Center delivers, everyone in the room can close their eyes. And at the end of it, without saying the words Boba Fett, you're probably going to see Boba Fett.
Right. Awesome. I think that was a good round to that story.
I would say my final note on the whole mess is when you're talking to a vendor and the vendor says, yes, we have API on our list of features coming. If they can't give you a date or the date's more than 18 months out, you might want to add caution. Right. Like, we all have an infinite number of features coming on our requested feature list. Until they actually have a scheduled delivery date, I don't know that I would count that as a feature that you really want to start banking your business on.
Agreed.
So, all right, all. Well, this has been another Sweet Spot. I'm Howard Holton.
And I'm Paul Lewis.
Thank you very much, and please like, subscribe, and we read every comment, whether we reply or not, or we just text them back and forth and get a chuckle off of what you guys take away from this. We love your comments, and if there's something you'd like to see, something you'd like to hear, we'd love you to comment. So please comment, subscribe, share, do all the things that every podcast is supposed to ask you to do. Thank you all, and hopefully you'll join us next week.
That was a very interesting topic, guys. And as always, my friends, please share and subscribe to this podcast or our video channel, and make sure that you continue your growth and development, because we want to lead, but we cannot do it alone. So share this with others so they can grow with you, and we see you on our next episode.